Hi guys, today's lesson is called The Character of Courage, and our sticky statement is courage from God leads to great things for God. To begin our lesson today, we are going to describe a few well-known women from history and see if you know who they are. Are you ready? Look at the picture on the screen, and then we will ask if you know who this woman is. This woman refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus she was riding. Who is she? Is she A, Michelle Obama, B, Maya Angelou, C, Dilma Rousseff, or D, Rosa Parks? This woman is Rosa Parks. She courageously stayed seated when told to move to the back of the bus. Here is the second well-known woman. This woman is known as the first female pilot to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Who is she? Is she A, Amelia Earhart, B, Catherine the Great, C, Malala Yousafzai, or D, Jane Austen? This woman is Amelia Earhart. She was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is a military award for single acts of heroism or extraordinary achievement in aerial flight. She was certainly courageous to fly across the Atlantic Ocean by herself. Let's see one more famous woman. This woman and her family are known for hiding Jewish people from the Nazi regime during World War II. Who is she? Is she A, Marie Curie, B, Corrie ten Boom, C, Indira Gandhi, or D, J.K. Rowling? This woman is Corrie ten Boom. Corrie survived a Nazi concentration camp and is famous for her book, The Hiding Place, that tells her story of life in a Nazi concentration camp/prison. Wow, all of these women had courage. Does anyone here know the meaning of the word courage? Courage is the ability to do something that you know is difficult or dangerous. All three of those women made a difference in the world we live in. Their stories are known all over the world. Today's lesson is the final lesson of a 4-part series called Wonder Women. Each of the lessons in this series highlights women of the Bible. Today, we are going to learn about another courageous woman. This woman inspired an entire army to fight for their country. Her name is Deborah, and her story is found in the best-selling book of all time, the Bible. Let's read Judges 4:4 to find out more about Deborah. Reads, and Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. Deborah was a unique person. What role did Deborah play for the nation of Israel? She was a prophetess. Deborah was a prophetess. She was a woman whom God used to communicate his message to people. Not only was she a prophetess, but she was also a what? She was a judge. Deborah delivered God's message to the people, and she was a political leader for the nation of Israel. She is unique because all of the other judges mentioned in the book of Judges were men. God chose to use Deborah to speak to his people, Israel, and to lead them as well. God does not choose people to serve him because of their skin color, background, or even their gender. God knew that Deborah would be a great leader in Israel because she trusted in him. Deborah knew that her courage to accomplish the task God had set for her came from him, and courage from God leads to great things for God. Deborah was a judge of Israel during a very challenging time in their history. When Deborah was the judge, the people of Israel were not following God's commands. At this point in their history, Israel was being ruled by a group called the Canaanites. Do you think that life under the rule of the Canaanites was good or bad for the Israelites? Give me a thumbs up for good or a thumbs down for bad. Let's go back and read Judges 4, 1 through 3 to find out. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. Yikes. They were treated harshly for 20 years before they finally realized their sin and asked for God's help. Do we have anyone here today who is 10 years old? Raise your hand if you're 10. If you were living at the time, you would have to live another 10 years before the oppression would be over. Can you imagine it? For the next 10 years of your life, you have to live under the rule of a bad king. You would be an adult before your people realized they needed to stop sinning and seek God's help. But it wasn't just the king of Canaan who was rough. He had a military commander by the name of Sisera. Sisera was in charge of a large army. The strength of his army was the 900 chariots of iron that he had. With his mighty army, he made sure that the Israelites were treated harshly. It was during this time in Israel's history that Deborah was chosen to be the judge. And, as we will find out, she was up for the task. While she was judging the nation, Deborah sent a message for Barak, the military commander for the nation of Israel, to take 10,000 men to fight against Sisera and his troops. She knew that God would help them win against their enemy. In fact, she reminded Barak that God had commanded him to go fight against Sisera and his army. That would be in Judges 4:6. Remember, she was not just a judge, but a prophetess. She had a message from God for Barak, and the message was a good one. It went something like this. Take 10,000 foot soldiers, go fight against Sisera with his army and his 900 chariots, and you are going to win that battle. Can you imagine being Barak? He had been living in oppression for 20 years with leaders who were violent. Would you have the courage to fight for your freedom? Would you have trusted what Deborah had said? Would you have had the faith that God would keep his promise? Give a thumbs up if you would go to battle immediately, or a thumbs down if you would be hesitant to go. Interesting. Well, let's see how Barak responded. I'm going to read Judges 4, verse 8. And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. Barak was hesitant. He said that he would only go if Deborah would go along with him. It seems that Barak, the commander of the army, lacked courage. Deborah, on the other hand, got her courage from God and wasn't afraid to go and fight against Sisera and his army. Deborah had to push Barak to have faith in God and courage to follow his commands. She told him that because he did not have the courage to go alone with his army and follow God's command, he would not get the honor for victory over Sisera. That honor would go to a woman. So Deborah, full of courage, went with Barak and his men to a mountain to wait for Sisera's troops. Just as God told Deborah, Sisera had gathered at the river with his army. Once again, Deborah encouraged Barak to get moving. Where did Deborah get her courage? Let's read Judges 4:14 and find out. Deborah said unto Barak, Up for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. Deborah's message to Barak shows us why she was so courageous. She reminded Barak of this truth. The Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand, and the Lord was going to go out before him to battle. When the Lord is leading your army, you can be courageous and know that you will win. Courage from God leads to great things for God. Their victory would come from the Lord. All Barak had to do was to go out to battle. Earlier we learned that Courage is the ability to do something that you know is difficult or dangerous. While Barak let his fear almost stop him from fighting the battle, Deborah knew by experience that God was powerful and had the courage to do something difficult. Deborah showed courage not only by going into battle with Barak and his army, but also by constantly reminding Barak that God was the one ahead of them in their battle. Deborah got her courage from God, and courage from God leads to great things for God. For Deborah and Barak, the outcome was great. Listen to what happened. I'm going to read Judges 4, verse 15. Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his hosts with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on his feet. It was the Lord who fought for them and defeated Sisera's army. Deborah displayed courage, and God gave them victory. Oh, and by the way, remember when Deborah told Barak that a woman would get the honor for defeating Sisera? Well, when his entire army was wiped out, Sisera ran away. In his attempt to escape, he tried to hide in the tent of a woman named Jael. God allowed Jael to be the one to defeat Sisera. When Barak came around to search for Sisera, he was already dead. Jael got the honor of defeating Sisera, just like Deborah said. That's in Judges 4:17 through 22. You may not be fearing an oppressive ruler, a literal battle, or an army with 900 iron chariots, but many of you do have real fears, pain, and grief, and you need the courage to face those battles. You might need courage in the middle of a thunderstorm when the power at your house gets knocked out. You might need courage in the middle of a hike when you think you might see snakes. Maybe you're being pressured by kids you know to do things you know are not right, and you need the courage to make wise choices. Some of you might be facing the pain of having a broken family, and you need the courage for life with a stepmom or a stepdad. Some of you have an illness, or a family member has an illness, and you need the courage to face the difficulties that come with being sick. Some of you might have moved to a different town. You need the courage to face life without friends you had back home. There are so many situations where you need courage. What are some other things when you might need courage? Our courage doesn't come from simply having self-confidence. True courage comes from a strong confidence in God. Take the time to ask God to give you the courage to do the things you know you should do. When you need courage, God is ready to listen to your request. True courage comes when we truly believe that God is bigger than the circumstance we are facing. As a result, we move forward and do what we know is right because we trust God to take care of the details. People who are courageous don't act recklessly or unwisely. They simply trust that God is bigger than the situation they are facing, and they choose to do the wise thing. Fear, pain, and grief are a natural part of human life, but how you choose to respond through your thoughts, words, and actions is what matters. Will you allow these emotions to rule you, or will you look to God for your source of strength? Deborah had this figured out. She had a deep trust in the promise of God, and God did great things through her. God wants to do great things through you, too. Remember, courage from God leads to great things for God. Think for a few seconds about the things you might be fearful of, or things that can cause you pain and grief. Will you take the time right now to ask God to help you to be a courageous person? Will you tell God that you fully trust Him and then ask Him for the courage that He can give? It's time to pray. We can look to events of the past, like Deborah's story, for inspiration in our life. Deborah chose to keep her focus on God instead of the circumstances she faced. As a result, she was courageous. This week, take the time to read Deborah's story for yourself. It can be found in the 4th chapter of the book of Judges. If you don't read very well, ask a parent or a guardian or even an older sibling to read Deborah's story to you. Each time you lack courage, take the time to remind yourself that God is bigger than whatever you are facing, and ask God to give you the courage you need to do what you know you should do. It's time for review questions. In which book of the Bible can we read about the events of the life of Deborah? A, the book of Deborah. B, the book of Barak. C, the book of Judges. C, the book of Judges. True or false? God never allows women to have leadership roles. False. What was one role Deborah had in the nation of Israel? A, a prophetess. B, the president. C, a senator. A prophetess. What was the other role that Deborah had in the nation of Israel? A judge. B, the vice president. C, the royal vizier. A, judge. What was the name of the military commander who had 900 chariots of iron? A, Jabin. B, Sisera. C, Jael. B, Sisera. What was the name of the military commander for the nation of Israel? A, Barak. B, Yusef. C, Osama. A, Barak. True or false? Barak displayed courage and received the honor for defeating Sisera and the army of the Canaanites. False. True or false? Deborah sent Barak off to battle by himself. False. She went with him. True or false? True courage comes from strong self-confidence. False. True courage comes from the confidence in God. Finish the sticky statement. Courage from God leads to A, a whole lot of trouble. B, more courage in the future. C, great things for God. C, great things for God. That is the end of today's lesson. I hope that you learned something and that you apply it to your lives and that you have a great, safe, and blessed week.